So if McLaren overtakes Aston Martin, does it become harder to ignore Lance Stroll not really performing at Aston Martin? Ben, what do you think?
Nope, because Lawrence Stroll owns the team. It's as simple as that. This is the Formula One version of Paul Menard, except Paul Menard actually won a race once upon a time. Look, nothing against Lance Stroll. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but it's so clear at this point that he's not on the level of a Fernando Alonso or a World Championship caliber driver. You only need to look at the gap in the point standings. It's only become more apparent since the summer break. I don't know. Maybe he needs to go out and break both of his wrists again. I say that only in jest, but it did seem like he got off to a great start to the year after he broke both of his wrists and barely made the start of a season. And those were his best drives of the year. I mean, since the summer break, he's been absolutely nowhere. And it certainly shows and is reflected in the standings here. Now, in terms of McLaren, can they catch Aston Martin here? They only have a few races left to do it. They're certainly on a better pace to be able to do it, and they have two cars regularly finishing up in the points compared to Aston Martin only having Fernando Alonso. It looks like he's lost a little bit of pace from the start of the year, but I just feel like that gap that Aston Martin built up. I mean, I saw the tweet from ESPN F1, I think, putting it out. I think they finished, 17th and 20th in Bahrain, and now they're scoring a double podium finish. It's just been a complete turnaround for McLaren, and it's been great to see for that team, but I just don't know if there's enough time left to overtake Aston Martin for P4 and the constructors. Will every track suit their car enough to the point where they can perform like this? How many points is Fernando Alonso going to score? I don't know. It's going to be very close and come down to the checker flag at Abu Dhabi, but I don't know that it's a sure thing or guarantee, even with Lance Stroll not really doing much of anything at the moment.
Ben, no matter how this career ends up, I think you gotta walk away with knowing that Lance Stroll's had to have had one of the most interesting careers in F1. And I just say that because it seemed like for such a time he was proving how viable pay drivers can be competitively. In the later William days, in Force India, before it was Racing Point, was genuinely sticking it up to his teammates. And it's just really seemed like the big turning point here was Fernando Alonso joining this Aston Martin outfit. And it does by day become harder to ignore him. And I think we talk about McLaren potentially overtaking them in the championship. I think it's a matter of how much does McLaren genuinely want this. We're at this time of the season now where obviously some of the more front runners like McLaren, or like Mercedes, like Red Bull are maybe backing out and putting their efforts maybe not towards current dev, but let's start focusing on next year's car. So I think it's a matter of how much McLaren really wants to take on Aston Martin and how much Aston wants to put funding into R&D to defend that position.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you both here. If we're looking specifically at the second half of the question, is it harder to ignore Stroll if McLaren overtakes Aston Martin? I don't think it's going to make it harder to ignore him because it's already pretty hard to ignore his poor performances so far, unless you're his dad, Lawrence Stroll, who, to be honest, I don't know how he's sacrificing Aston Martin, like the whole team, over his son, because Aston Martin right now really is just riding on Fernando Alonso's back. He's the only one who's bringing in any points or getting them further in the constructor standings. And if McLaren does overtake them, then I don't think that it's going to make much of a difference looking at Lance Stroll and, Lawrence Stroll's decision of, whether keeping him in the team or taking him out, because he is his father. So I think at the end of the day, he's going to be a part of the team. And I think that McLaren is in the position to overtake Aston Martin because, as we've seen in the past few races, as we saw today, even with the double podium, the upgrades that they've brought, they've been doing an incredible job. So I just think that even now it's hard to see Lance Stroll and what he's doing for the team, which is really not much. And I think that Aston Martin, the best decision they can make at this point is to leave him and to take on someone who's more equal to Fernando Alonso's talent and who's, pulling their weight in bringing points to the team.
And Isha, now, if I can chime in here. Sorry, I'll just chime in here with a couple more things real quick here. I will say this about Lance Stroll. I'll never forget that unbelievable podium he took his rookie season in 2017 in Baku in that Williams.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
A pole position to Turkey in 2020. I mean, he has had his moments. Let's give credit where it's due. Mm-hmm. But over the course of a full season, there is no debate in terms of who the senior driver is at Aston Martin pulling in all the points. But again, to your point, Isha, as well, Fernando Alonso is 42 years old. How many years does he realistically have left that he would be able, regardless of whether or not he wants to stay in Formula One, to be able to carry the team on his back in this way? And you've got Felipe Drugovich, the reigning F2 champion, stuck in a reserve role at this team. It does feel like there's a dynamic there that isn't great for the ladder system to get to Formula One.
Yeah, Ben, and I'm going to jump on this really quick. I know we were backing up here, but we were talking about this last night. It's a matter of almost how a lot of people see Graham Rahal in IndyCar. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when I'm going to step out of the car and kind of take in Dad's role and potentially go and run this team. Or as our friend Josh Burch mentioned, guy has tennis as a hobby, might go pro there. He's got other avenues.